All right, beautiful. Looks like we have some folks tuning in from New York, Arizona, California, different parts of Washington. So we got a good audience today. Thank you all for showing out. We are I think okay to get started, and then as folks trickle in, they can join. But good evening, everyone. Welcome to Writing What Haunts Us, New Works by Yonsei Authors. Again, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, name, pronoun, organization, or where you're calling in from. My name is Troy Osaki. I'll be your MC and moderator this evening. He, him pronouns, calling in from Seattle. Just very excited to be here with you all and among some very brilliant voices and authors, and to be able to celebrate their works tonight. I am mixed Filipino-Japanese, so specifically fourth, fifth generation on my Japanese side. So I have family who migrated to the States as early as the late 1800s to Hawaii. And then a little later on, family who migrated to the West Coast. I'm a poet born and raised in Seattle, and I've been very fortunate to work alongside some very wonderful organizations and businesses who include folks who are partnering to help put this event on tonight. So just want to give a big thank you to the City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, Tadaima, and the Elliott Bay Book Company, just for all the support. And then a big thank you to Densho for hosting this event. Please, be sure to check them out as you are here in this event and afterward. Before we hop into everything, I also just want to thank everyone for being here in celebration of tonight's authors, as well as just, personally as an artist, want to acknowledge the challenging and painful moment we're in right now with the siege and attacks on Gaza. And in different ways, I've seen tonight's authors grapple with the ways in which our family's histories and our position as people of Japanese descent are directly connected to what's going on today, and why it's important to speak out. So just a lot of deep appreciation for their work and who they are as people dreaming and working toward a better future, and excited for you all to hear them tonight. So with that said, we'll get into the program. Tonight we'll have Brynn Saito kick us off with a reading, and then following will be Jami Nakamura Lin, and closing us out will be Brandon Shimoda. We'll then transition into a moderated conversation and leave the last few minutes for audience Q&A that we hope you stick around for. So now, as we jump into it, I'd like to welcome the incredible Brynn Saito, whose latest book, Under a Future Sky, is out now with Red Hen Press. And as I was reading it, I really felt this book was full of powerful portals that connected the reader to collective pasts and imagined futures. One of my favorite lines in the book is, "Hot bones of North America, remember me." Can we welcome Brynn to the spotlight?
Thank you, Troy. Yeah, thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you so much for you all, everyone who's logged in today, just taking the time to be with us today. Troy, such a beautiful introduction and framing of today, and the tenderness and complexity of this moment. So really, thank you for that. Calling in from Fresno, California, on the traditional lands of the Mano and Yokats people, from my office here at Fresno State, where I'm a professor. And I'm going to read maybe 3 or 4 poems from the book. The first couple are sort of about this figure of the animal that I guess has haunted me. And it's in my mind, it's sort of the animal of maybe addiction, the animal of trauma. I guess when I think about being haunted, I think about the ways in which our history is Japanese Americans and our other histories, any history sort of born from violence and war and struggle, how they continue to haunt, and how the healing continues to happen, and just how many generations it takes to heal. And as part of that reckoning, I think my family personally has, sort of dealt with addiction in different ways. And so these first couple poems sort of touch on that. This first poem is called Ordinary Animal. No one tells me how to name it. I name it animal. I tell it never come. I watch it strengthen on the fever farm, take tendon after tendon, lift its own spoon at the family table, taste. I watch it grow tall with the family's starch and salts, the sweats and the family's wide awake eyes staring like light beams at the all-night ceiling fear fuel. No one tells me how to name it. I name it animal. I name it clean, crushed beer can, cop outfit calling, binged on. I tell it, come here, come willing to dance. Say, take me by the eyes and explain yourself and your blood time with this blood life, this river family, that valley farm. I say, what took us down that day, river worn, wordless, what takes us down, animal, explain you. And this is another animal poem in that series, subtitled, Her Sobriety is a Mountain in the August Dark. I had a vision, 2 queens, no war, private taste of pine and the light chorus, rock dawn and night worry, impetus of bark, the inner flare, animal, free you, like daughterhood goes away, go away. Do you trust the hawk's blooming circles? It's time. Next poem is called Theses on the Philosophy of History. It's a 3-part poem, and the subtitle is Listening to the Presidential Debate While Stuck in Traffic. And this was written in 2016. So that debate. 1. Roads clogged with people and vehicles crossing the Golden Gate. Give my rage back to me, I know how to hold it. Ghost fog grows and stretches itself through the bars, and I'm ready for it. On the radio, the white general and the white general yank each other into the deep end, good heavens. Don't teach me to hate my language tonight. Don't teach me to hate my language and their lips tonight. Tongo says capitalism walks on water. I've seen my TV, I believe it. All of the redwoods in the world can't keep this country from wanting to die. The future has arrived and it's doubled over, and the best of us are ready for love, though we're burning. 2. Roads clogged with people and vehicles crossing the Golden Gate. My family is Eduardo and Mitsuo and Marilyn and Alma and Samuel and Fumio and the twin who drank herself to death, and the auntie who drank herself to death, and the Issei and the Nisei and the Sansei with their rock faces and nightmares. Undisguise me, said the stone. Undisguise me, said the stone to the desert light. Undisguise me, said the stone to the river. Lay me down under harsh water flowing under midnight starlight. Take my face off of my face, said the stone. Shake me open. 3. Roads clogged with people and vehicles crossing the Golden Gate. The white general and the white general teach me how to hate my language on the radio tonight. Which nightmare of a framework makes the human count? Which bodies count and which count against? Grandma met Grandpa in those camps. Let me give your rage back to you, said the poem. Stop trying so damn hard, said the poem. Everything that has ever happened to you and your family keeps happening, and the love keeps coming in with its surgery. Get good with yourself, said the poem. Get gone. And the last poem I'll read, I think I have an image for this one that we're going to put up. Much of the book was inspired by a trip I did to Gila River, where my grandparents were incarcerated during the war. I did a trip there in 2019 with my dad, and that's a sketch of him right there, done by one of my students. And next to the sketch is a image of the garden my dad's been tending for decades. And much of the book sort of draws on images of the garden, perhaps as a space of nourishment and healing and cultivation. And this poem sort of references the garden and references that trip I did with my dad to Gila and Poston. So thank you again for being here. And I'll close with this letter to my dad. Dear Dad, there's a new way I see the garden now, the one you've been tending for decades on Garden Avenue, of all names, the street of our family home. In haiku written by camp prisoners, days and seasons are tracked by the falling leaves of the moss rose petal to earth. Poets in camp numbered months and years by the memory of their home gardens left behind on the West Coast, flowering rhododendrons and peony buds they imagined as vibrant, their stalks remaining firm. I think of us traveling that week in the summer of 2019, away from California, along the train's course, through Arizona and onto Poston and Gila River. How far I brought you from your garden. Did you think of the sagos, the summer tomatoes and basil, the azaleas and red maples, the night blooming lantana, trees needing trimming, grass going brown, all of the work awaiting you? Did you imagine the dogs chirping, the silent white bucket, and Mom dragging the hose across the lawn to wake the fountain? Here in the Southwest, I find myself pining for the great Central Valley, as I did when I lived in New York, or that decade by the bay, exhausted from cold bridges and colder waters, longing with my entire body for the landscapes of childhood's kingdom, smog dust and all. I understand now I am nothing. I'm the daughter of a living father, blessed to be returning to you after our fire and ice travels through North American landscapes, spotted by our elders' lives, their prison desert homes, and other jails and prisons, with and without bars and barbed wire. You were not taken. In the night and shirtless, you were not captured or broken by the century's light, despite my nightmares. You took your time in the summer garden, where Lee and I played as the light sets, basiling our bodies against mosquitoes, baking mud sweets in California's sugary dusk. Dad, your voice is wise now, beyond kindness. I'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your listening today. It's really an honor to be here. Looking forward to the conversation among all four of us. But with that, I'm going to introduce our next reader for today, Jami Nakamura Lin. And Jami's book, The Night Parade, will come out on November 7th. So please get that book, pre-order it now. It's a speculative memoir, and I'm always telling my students that this thing exists, the speculative memoir, Jami, and I'm always sharing this book with my students. I'm excited to assign it to them because I love that merging, right, of speculative and imaginative and mythical, but also rooted in our stories, our personal stories. And on a personal note, Jami, your writing that you've done on motherhood and grief and mental illness and mental health, I think has been incredibly healing for me and for my family and for so many of us. So I'm delighted to share the stage with you today, and please join me, everyone, in welcoming Jami Nakamura Lin.
Thank you so much, Brynn. Thank you so much for sharing your poetry with us. I'm so honored to be here amongst these people that I admire so much. And thank you so much to Densho and Tadaima and to Seattle Bay for also supporting this event. As Brynn said, I'll be reading from my book, The Night Parade, which will be coming out in a couple weeks. And I also wanted to thank Lisa Hoffman-Kuroda, who's in the audience here, because she did a lot of the research and translation of the Japanese folklore and stories that provided the backbone of this book. And without Lisa's help, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So this book is illustrated by my sister, Corey. So the text is interspersed with a lot of these images of yokai or other Japanese creatures, monsters, ghosts, spirits of legend. And I talk about my bipolar disorder, my father's death, and other types of intergenerational hauntings, and try to interrogate the idea of how do we learn to live with these things, the things that haunt us. And I'll be talking today about the dugong from Okinawa. Once, my sister Corey tells my family, the Okinawan dugong flourished. She tells us this as we stand beside the tide pools outside the aquarium on the north side of Okinawa. It is May 2017. I am on a 4-month Japanese fellowship, and my family has come to visit me. I am studying yokai, the monsters, creatures, and spirits of Japanese legend, and their stories. Oh, and you can put up the dugong illustration right now. All these illustrations are done by my sister Corey, who's also here. So this is the dugong. Long, long ago, the dugong was the god of the sea. But over time, the sea changed, and what the people worshiped changed with it. The dugong was demoted to carrying the god's messages. It was integral to the community. Its flesh, stories said, could make you immortal. Now, Corey tells me, its habitat is being destroyed by the construction of military bases. 20% of Okinawa is controlled by the United States, and now the military is trying to build a base in the bay around Hanoko, one of the world's most biodiverse areas, on soil containing remains of civilians who died in the Battle of Okinawa. It's not even good for construction, Corey says. All those bones make the ground unsteady. Now there are 32 American bases on the island and only a few Okinawan dugongs left, despite all the way the Uchinanchu elders and community have tried to fight the bases and preserve the land and the seascape. But the dugongs still exist, I tell my sister, thinking this is comforting. Corey dips her hand into the tide pool. I hate to say it, she says, but all these animals will eventually just be a tale we tell to future generations. She gestures to the water beyond. At this point, we're just waiting. A month later, after my family has returned to Chicago and my husband has come to stay with me in Japan, I get a message from my mother asking to schedule a family video chat. This, combined with the fact that my father has had stomach pains earlier in this week, feels ominous. When I was young, my father had a benign stomach tumor, and ever since he's had to have surgeries every couple of years to remove related scar tissue. Each surgery requires weeks of pain stuck in the hospital. If he has to be hospitalized again, I ask my husband, should I go home? You don't even know if that's what the call's about, he says. But it could be, I tell him. You love to suffer twice, he says. And it's true. I'm a paragon of premature pessimism, a doyen of divining doom, a firm believer that simply imagining a nightmare provides its own protection. And yet I'm wholly unprepared for the news that arrives on the call, that my father is dying. My father is dying. I have prepared for so many outcomes, and yet somehow not this. Right up until the moment my father says the word terminal, I am certain he will live forever. Unlike my grandmother and her sister, whose immortality I believe in due to their supernatural octogenarian and strength, it is my father's body's weaknesses, through which it has always endured, that provide this impression. Each time he is hospitalized only increases my belief that this is a chronic situation that will last forever. But here's the thing. Death hides inside the familiar. This is its greatest trick. Yokai hide and then show their faces where you least expect it. When my father tells us he is dying, my astonishment is total. Over the call, my mother's weeping is silent. It is the 3 daughters whose howls swell and then roar, all of us at our own pitch and strength. Inside this tiny apartment, a gulf emerges before the world before and the world that exists now. An array of potential futures falls over like dominoes until there's only one left. No one is immortal. Our grief undulates through the wires. In Okinawan tradition, the dugong is also a psychopomp, a figure that guides souls to the afterlife, a role that functions both as guide and boundary. Mythology and religion possess so many boundaries between the living and the dead, as if without them, we will stumble where we are not supposed to go. Some of these boundaries are spatial, like in Greece, the river Styx. Some are temporal. In Japan, the spirits of the ancestors return specifically during the festival of Obon. In Taiwan, this occurs in the ghost month. But spirits can also be bound to specific times, like the middle of the night or at twilight when the murky light hides as much as it uncovers. Twilight is called omagatoki, or the hour of meeting evil spirits, the marker that divides night and day. When you feel a cold breeze rustle against the back of your legs, when you smell something peculiar with no referent, when you get the prickly feeling my mother calls the heebie-jeebies, when darkness falls upon you. These are the ways to know that in the twilight hours, a yokai is approaching. Boundaries, says yokai scholar Komatsu Kazuhiko, are where order meets disorder. But also, we live in an era when conventional boundaries are continually disappearing. When I returned home to Chicago from Japan, I become obsessed with time. Before I saw it as an expansive resource to be gambled with, and now I see it for what it is, something you can count on the fingers of a single hand. While researching on the internet, which provides little information on my father's rare cancer, I stumble across an article about anticipatory grief, the sorrow over the thing not yet happened. At first I think, yes, this is it. This is the name. But 3 paragraphs later, the flood of recognition is too much. I close the article. I do not want to know. I already know. Living in the throes of anticipatory grief means being hypervigilant at every moment, to constantly brace your heart for the wound while still loving and being present with the dying. How long can one live like this? What I believe in those months when he is dying is that anticipatory grief must feel worse than actual grief. I do not know for sure. I have nothing to compare it to. I only know that fear and uncertainty creates a gruesome whole that is more than the sum of its parts. And once, long ago, some young fishermen captured a dugong in their nets and set her free. In return, the dugong told them to go to the mountains, for a tsunami was coming. The fishermen spread the word far and wide, but only their own village believed them. Only their own village evacuated. It is easier to believe when we know the source, when we trust the mouth. The neighboring villages scoffed at the men and stayed home. But when the tsunami of 1771 hit and the enormous tidal wave rolled in, the kind that reaches to the heavens, only those who believed the dugong, who anticipated what was coming, survived. Over the next 200 years, Okinawa had to survive wave after wave of brutality. In 1874, Japan's Meiji government colonized the islands and ended their sovereignty. In 1945, in the Battle of Okinawa, the United States was responsible for almost 150,000 Okinawan deaths, most of them civilians, over a third of the pre-war population. We became an event in a more powerful nation's history, writes Elizabeth Miki Brina in her memoir, Speak Okinawa, a place for more powerful nations to attack and act against each other. Why would we expect the American or Japanese militaries to care about the animals of Okinawa when they have historically cared so little about its people? And what can the dugong do against such things? Once the story said they were the god of the sea, then that they were merely the messenger. At one time, they can control a tsunami. In later tales, they could only warn of it. Now it is on the brink of extinction. The number of existing Okinawan dugongs changes based on the source. Some say less than 10, others 2, others 3. Others don't believe any remain at all. How much easier it is to confirm death than life. How hard it is to know how long twilight will last when we do not know what season it is or where we are on the longitude and latitude of the earth. All we know is that we are facing the dark. And yet, the elders in the community continue to fight for the dugong's life, for its home. They are still fighting now. Recently, in 2023, there have been rumors of a new Okinawan dugong sighting, rumors that the Japanese government would rather have us not believe. It would help them if we gave up this hope, to give up fighting for these creatures, this ecology, this land. I hope the dugong, wherever they are, however many there are far away from the military bases, hiding under thick beds of seagrass. The dugong cannot stop the tsunami. It can only tell us it is coming. Listen. Thank you so much. I chose to read this piece a while ago because I wanted to be able to talk about Okinawa and the dugongs, I haven't gotten to read this piece other places, but especially what's going on with the Palestinian genocide right now. I felt like it really connected to all the different complicities and the ways that so many of these things haunt us. And the American war machine, how it undergirds so many of the of our land, both here and elsewhere. And now I'm happy to pass it over to Brandon Shimoda and talk about his work. Brandon is the author of many books, both poetry and prose, but most recently Hydra Medusa, which came out this summer in June from Nightboat Books. And I love Brandon's work for so many different reasons, but one of the things I really appreciated about it is how it exists on these borderlands, this kind of friction, fringe space. And sometimes it's between lands, sometimes it's between dream and waking worlds, sometimes it's between life and death. And there's some poems in here that exist like in these witching hours in the middle of the night when his daughter, when he has the baby daughter and he's awake because of her. And I really appreciate the type of clarity and also the type of ambiguity that he cracks open in those spaces. So I'm happy to pass open to Brandon. I'm really excited to hear from him.
Thank you so much, Jami. So generous. And the night parade, I was wondering if my daughter was here actually, because my daughter Yumi's is enormously interested in yokai, and I think sometimes believes that she is one, and sometimes I believe that she is one also. And I showed her all of Corey's art in the book, and she loves it, and I love the book. So we're collaborating on that reading experience together. It's an incredible book to read at night, actually, in the spaces that you're describing. And so it's very strange for a memoir of the kind of gravity that your book embodies to be a page turner. Somehow it's a page turner, which seems strange because it's your life. I guess what I'm saying is that your life is a page turner. Thank you also for both to you and Troy and Brynn for opening up the space of thinking about what's happening in Palestine right now, invoking the genocide, Jami. I'm in Providence, Rhode Island, on the 16th floor of a hotel. I don't know very much about Providence at all. I flew in a couple hours ago. But what I do know, what I do understand, is that the occupation of this land is codependent with and bolsters the occupation of Palestine. And thinking also about the connection between that and the occupation of Okinawa. And Palestine has been at the center of my thinking, has been at the center of my attention, and also is at the center of, and I feel like inflames my understanding of what Japanese American incarceration means now. Thank you very much to Tadaima and Densho. I'm going to read a little bit from my book, Hydra Medusa. I had a dream last night that a rainbow was burning. I had a dream last night that the war fit on the tip of a finger. I had a dream last night that a scream did not need a hill to gather speed to reach the people. I had a dream last night that a shrine burned down and was replaced with a shrine, identical but empty. Photographs of the dead once grimaced from the walls, and the aura of a tree in the shape of smoke keeping cool the dead, a perfect instrument. The shrine. I approached the altar, colorful with photographs of people I did not know, would never, but now I had seen them, as real to me as people I talk to but do not see, are alive, loved, deserve to be visited. Strangers go all over the rainbow. Never settle. Do not situate before the gaze of one particular stranger. The dead were not gazing. They wanted it to be over, their reflection to be stronger, like a lunar sound, materializing a hymn of thanksgiving to the missing. We stood in the dirt and stared at the moon, blood, red and orange, partly occluded by the premonition of a planet that might one day overcome everything that has been degraded to manifest a new birthright. We watched the moon rise above the heads of ancestors who died in a country of which they were aliens, enshrined by an alien evaporating in the manner of what will not be remembered, but in burned shadows. But what is an ancestor? I have been asking this question the past 6 or 7 years of survivors and descendants of Japanese American incarceration. It is a way to think about our relationship to the dead, their relationship to us, and about how we understand ourselves, our obligations, and our agency in relation to the past and to the future. Here is a small selection of answers to the question, what is an ancestor? A dead person you love, said my daughter, Yumi Shimoda. My beginning, said Joni Kimoto. The web through time that binds us to the beginning, said Elan Rie. The love that binds and transforms, said Mike Ishii. Time, memory, and emotion, said Sandra Honda. Memories I did not know I had, said Patrick Hayashi. Fragments of my brain, said Kyoko Moroli. Guardian angels, said Susan Kamei. Benevolent ghosts, said Ria Tajiri. A whole host of ghosts with names I don't know passing in and out of the earth plane, said Brynn Saito. Colorful, joyous energy moving in an enormous circle, said Kimiko Guthrie. A spiritual energy, said Shizu Saldamando. Someone whose energy I feel passing through me, said Mia Ayumi Mahatra. Leftover electrical impulse, said Madeline Mori. Infinite compassion, said Star Miyata. A nebulous cloud, said Anna Kimura. Seeds floating through dreams, said Brian Comey Dempster. Nature and land, said Darren Wakasa. Trees, said Adina Black. Stories, said Morgan Ome. A way of living in narrative, said Vince Schleitweiler. Answers, but more often ways into questions, said Aaron Aoyama. Those that have gone through grief for my family to exist, said Carly Ikeda Lee. The key to my survival, said Heather Nagami. The fire in my veins, said Sarah Onitsuka. A responsibility, said Anna Iwataki. People who resisted state-sanctioned violence or heteronormativity or any of the cruelties done upon the historically disempowered, said Maggie Tokuda Hall. I had a dream last night that I wrote a book about my grandfather. Here is the first paragraph of the book. My grandfather had one memory of his childhood in Hiroshima, washing the feet of his grandfather's corpse. He was 6 or 5 or 4. He stood in the doorway of the room where his grandfather's corpse had been prepared. His grandfather, covered in a white towel and lying in the middle of the room, looked like he was sleeping. There was a sponge in a large white bowl of lucid water and a robe tightly folded in the corner. First thing my grandfather thought when his mother and 3 older brothers nodded at him to enter was, he looks like he is dreaming. Upset with the book, my grandfather attacked me. He had the fortification and the force of all our dead behind him, and they too were upset with the book I had written. So his attack was their attack. I should have given in to it, because if their attack was sincere, and if it satisfied the extent of their being upset, then I would soon be joining them and become part of that force. And yet I tried to escape. I ran to a building. People were eating at long cafeteria tables. My grandfather, catching up to me, started pushing the tables with the people still sitting at them. He started pushing the tables into me. I laid down on the floor, hoping the tables would pass over. I had in my hands, with its spine against my neck, the book I had written about him. I had a dream last night that I took Yumi to visit her great-grandfather's grave. When we got there, his grave was gone and had been replaced with a white obelisk. Yumi sat down and, as if knowing exactly how to behave in front of it, closed her eyes. Inscribed on the obelisk were the words, Hydra Medusa. Now I have the pleasure of bringing it back around to Troy Osaki. You gave us some of your bio already, being the great-grandchild of Filipino and Japanese immigrants. I also want to mention that you were a three-time, I mean, I'm telling you this if you didn't know, as if you didn't know, you three-time Grand Slam poetry champion. And the reason I mention that is because that was my introduction to your work. I don't remember when, but there was one night years ago in a fit of loneliness, I discovered somehow a couple of videos of you on YouTube performing your slam poetry, performing poetry. And the poem I remember the most, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong exactly about this, but it featured your grandparents, and it featured your family's experience related to the concentration camps. And in that fit of loneliness, discovering not just the poem, but your performance of it, your embodying of that complex range of emotions, I got really emotional. And I remember watching the video several times in a row and really feeling grateful to be connecting with something that I couldn't exactly name. But the way that you were, I mean, it was maybe 9 years ago, the way your face was contorting with the energy of your recollection and your love for your grandparents was just really powerful. Since then, I've come to know you also as a poet and a person, and also as somebody who's deeply compassionate in the brief times that we've spent together. And as I'm sure people will see after this, when Troy leads our conversation, Troy's level of attention is really incredible. And it's the level of love. And I'm grateful to be sharing this space with you, Troy. Thank you.
Oh man, thank you for the very generous introduction, Brandon. Thank you. I was able to, I actually just got back from Portland yesterday where I was visiting my grandma. My grandpa passed away maybe a year or two ago, but I still been able to, as much as possible, visit my grandma. She's like in her late 90s right now, but we got lunch at like Elmer's and breakfast at Sherry's the day before. But I appreciate, all of your readings again, Brynn, Jami, and Brandon, and the connections to land and just ancestors and other worlds, and all in a direction towards like a future, right? That we're building. I think with that, we'll go into the next portion of tonight's program, which is the Q&A. So we have 3 to 4 questions that I'll share with our lovely authors, but we would be very excited for folks to contribute any questions that are top of mind for them into the chat, and we'll have our behind the scenes moderators and folks who are supporting collate some of the questions, if any, and then we can get to them in a few minutes as well. So I'll kick it off, and so we'll do a few questions on my end, and then we'll get into Q&A with the audience. But just to start, would love to kick it off with the question: who is an elder or ancestor, descendant, or mythological figure you'd like to invite into our conversation today? We'll start there. Brynn, would it be okay to start with you again? Is that okay?
Yeah. The first, actually thinking about grandparents, really, both of you mentioning grandparents. I'm going with my family next week to Korea, and my mother, I'm Korean American and Japanese American, fourth generation on both sides. And as we prepare for that journey, it's my mother's first trip to Korea. And I've been thinking a lot about my Korean American grandmother who passed away years ago now. And this desire to ask her so many questions, for those of us that have living grandparents or great grandparents, I envy you. I think I wish I did more of that work when I was younger, and wonder, my Korean elders fled the Japanese occupation, 1905, 1910. That's what brought them to the Central Valley of California. So there's so much we don't know about that side of our history. And as we're in this time of ancestors, I want to call her in, and I wish I had asked more of her about that lineage, and just to not know. There's this ache, right, to not knowing different pieces of your own history. So I'll call her in, my Korean with Marilyn, my Korean American grandmother. Maybe can I pass it to Jami?
Thank you, Brynn. For my ancestors, I'd like to bring in my father. And it's funny to think about him as being an ancestor because 3 of my 4 grandparents are living, and it's funny to think of them as being very vibrant, active parts of my life, even though they're in their 90s, who, are very active with my daughter and things like that. And yet my father is an ancestor. And so this kind of that shifting of boundaries and spaces always seems funny to me. My dad is Taiwanese American, so I'm second generation Taiwanese. And it's interesting to me that we have so many different mixed Asian Japanese Americans. Sometimes that doesn't happen. And many of us with countries that have very fraught relationships with Japan. So I thought that was an interesting dynamic and relationship we have. And I also wanted to bring, since you asked about mythological creatures, the Baku, which is this yokai that's like a dream eater. In Chinese mythology, it's called Mo. It's this chimera that was made up of all these extra parts when the gods made up all the other creatures. This one was made out of the leftovers, and it feasts on nightmares. And I think since so many of us have these strong associations with dreams, wanted to bring that in this space as well. Yeah. Oh, and I'll pass it to Brandon.
Yeah, if I could invoke 2 briefly, the Lebanese poet Etel Adnan, who died 2 years ago in November. To say she was a friend is an understatement. I'm not exactly sure what she was. She was more than a mentor, and she actually rejected the idea of being a mentor. But she was one of the first poets. She was 97 when she passed away. She was one of the first poets, I think, who really modeled for me what it meant to be a poet. She referred to being a poet as a counter profession, and as a form of personal and mental expression and perpetual rebellion. And also thinking again about Palestine, she was one of the first poets I read who was thinking alongside the Palestinian liberation movement, connecting it to Native Americans, connecting it to the atomic bomb in ways that were really profound that I'm still trying to understand. The reason why I want to bring her into this space is because in times like these, I would always email her and ask her what she thought about what was going on. And she always had this incredible, very acute and also cosmic response to that question. I can no longer do that, but so I turned to her writing instead for that answer. And then my father's mother, died 18 days ago. And I feel like I've been trying to bring her into the room in ways that I didn't really anticipate when she was alive. I knew she was going to die, so I had time to prepare for it. But something happened when she did die that I didn't really prepare for. And I think part of that is wanting this kind of quietly desperate need for her to appear. So yeah, maybe she's with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you all. I think we have a very powerful room right now. Grandparents, poets, mentors, father, yokai. I think something that just from some of these sharings kind of goes into the next question around dreams and dream worlds, knowing that this is something that does I think come up quite often in over the different works that you all have shared from tonight. So the next question is, what is your relationship to dreams or dream worlds? What are the dreams that haunt you? Perhaps the dreams that return to you over and over again. So just to share some excerpts, Jami, in part 4, Ketsu, we read, "No one wants to hear about dreams. So let's say these are folk tales. Let's say these are myths." And Brynn, in Letter to My Grandmother, we read, "A portal closes. My time in the desert is coming to an end. There's no way to imagine your young life enduring the camps except in dream poems." And Brandon, we heard from you earlier from the pieces that open and close Hydra Medusa, but we read in the book, "I had a dream last night that a rainbow was burning. I had a dream last night that the war fit on the tip of a finger. I had a dream last night that a scream did not need a hill to gather speed to reach the people." So in reflection on these excerpts and on dreams, how do you approach writing about dreams? What are your processes? What's the role of dreams? Don't feel like you have to answer every question, but maybe just general reflections on dreams and dream worlds. So perhaps, Jami, are you willing to kick us off this round?
Sure. I've always been a very deep and intense dreamer. Like every night, I probably have very dramatic, long dreams. And so through my life, then as I've shared before, I've constantly have people being like, this again, or like, not being very interested in hearing about my dreams because I always have had a lot. But I feel like they are this kind of alternate logic that goes through my days that provide like a narration that's kind of like in tandem with what's going through the day. Is this kind of other underground world that's happening at night. I think throughout the writing of my book, which happened very intensely over the past, 2 or 3 years or so, when I was thinking so deeply about my father, I'd also just had my young daughter as well. So my sleep was much more fractured, especially in those early months. And so I dreamt about my father almost every night in these very surreal kind of circumstances. And in that way, and since I stopped writing the book, I haven't dreamt of him in months. So it was like he was this like dream person with me throughout the writing of the book. And then after I finished it, it kind of like it went back into the dream world, and I did not have access to that anymore. But I think when I write about dreams, I think it's still something I'm trying to figure out about how to do it. But I have this essay that's about the Baku, the nightmare eater, and it's all about this kind of this push and pull of the struggle that I had of not wanting these dreams to go away, but then also like my sleep was very fractured, and there were all these other additional struggles as well. And then I kind of told the stories, as in the excerpt you read, Troy, I told the stories that were my dreams kind of as like little folk tales, like kind of written in third person as these kind of like little vignettes, as kind of a secondary through line of the story. But that's why I appreciate talking to all of you, because you all take dreams very seriously as well.
Yeah, I guess I'll just briefly share a quick, like Jami, when I was writing the book, I started dreaming a little bit about my grandparents, and I had a dream it's sort of like at the end of the process of writing, where they arrived on my porch with their suitcases, and it was like they were finally coming home from camp. And it was 2020, and they were finally coming home. And I remember, Brandon, you mentioned to us last time we met that the word haunting and the word homecoming are sort of connected, or to be haunted is also to return home. And they were happy, and they weren't that happy when I was a child. There was a lot of intensity and angst, and so they were like so happy, and they were home, and they were at my house, and I made a bed for them, and I don't know, like I love that. I loved it. It felt so good. It felt so nice to feel them happy and coming home. And yeah, it communicated something really important to me. Yeah.
How did you feel when you when you woke up? That was a dream, right? I
Yeah, that was a dream.
Yeah.
I felt good. Like it was one of those, I think I need a nightmare eater. I think 'cause sometimes I wake up and I'm just, there's just the intensity of the dream is there, but that one, there was like a sense of peace. Yeah. Oh, is Brandon? Oh, there you are.
Oh, sorry.
I'll pass it to you, Brandon.
It froze right at the moment where you said nightmare eater, and then I think something happened.
It's because they were brought into the space.
I know, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, Jami, you so let's say these are folk tales, that sentence. It's such an amazing way of reframing a dream. They're folk tales. Which yeah, I love thinking about them in that way. I mean, I feel like dreams, for me, they are just as much of an experience as an experience. And my relationship to them is the same as my memory of an experience is to that experience. Like increasingly, I have a very difficult time not differentiating between a dream and a non-dream, but saying that a dream is in any way separate from anything else that has happened to me in my life. And I don't know if that's sort of willful thinking, some sort of desire, but I do feel, yeah, Jami also used that word logic. And I mean, the dreams that I was writing in Hydra Medusa, many of them were dreams that I had during the early months of the pandemic, where I felt I was really in need of a different kind of logic. Not only in relation to just like the more, I think, brutal logic of waking life, but just a different way to understand time. And then also, yeah, thinking about, Brynn, your dream of your grandparents coming home, I mean, that's where we can visit people, or that's where people visit us. And that's a huge reason why I feel like it's just as real as an experience, because those visits, sometimes the visits that I experience in a dream are more indelible to me than things that actually happened. Thinking about my grandmother, for example, and how just in the last 18 days, I've realized that I don't have that many memories about her, even though we spent so much time together and she was a big part of my life, especially my younger life. So as that's fading away, I realize that dreams can actually be a space where not only some of those memories are reanimated, but I can form new memories of her, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I appreciate those sharings, the logic, the alternate logic, the line between homecoming, haunting. This is very exciting. We have a few questions actually from the chat that I think can keep this conversation going. But I'll kick it off with maybe the first one that we got in. So we have a question. What, if any, challenges have you encountered writing about the Nikkei experience, specifically about the act of writing? So any challenges that you can reflect on as far as writing about the Nikkei experience? I'll leave it an open floor for this one to give some folks time to think, but if anyone's feeling pulled to answer right now. Would love to hear it.
Did my screen freeze again? Did my screen freeze?
I think no, you're good. You're good. We're good. Yeah, any thoughts on this one? It could also be in tandem with the second question. So either yeah, challenges writing about the Nikkei experience, or there's a question following that one around just questions around writing through trauma. So how do you think trauma has influenced you or the younger generation? So perhaps either reflections on either of those questions.
Yeah, I'll just say those are great questions, and they feel really big. And I think we have about 60 seconds left or something, but I know we're getting close on, want to honor people's time. And but I appreciate that first question, because I realized, yeah, for myself, I don't so much think of it, when I sit down to write, I'm not really okay, I'm going to write about the Nikkei experience, or I'm going to write about my experiences XYZ. I think I just write. I write out of urgency, just for myself first, and to make sense of something I'm grappling with. And then it gets kind of put into these larger contexts and frames and histories, and yeah, I think I feel the reverberations of trauma in all of our work. And I kind of mentioned for myself personally, thinking about these kind of legacies of addiction, and how a lot of my elders maybe have coped with being incarcerated or whatnot, and how that has, just, continued and trickled down. And I think for me, when around trauma, I think, my gosh, the healing takes generations, and so you think about these ongoing wars and ongoing occupations that are happening, and it's mind-boggling and disheartening and terrifying to think about how long the healing takes. And so I think it's overwhelming, I think, to me. That doesn't quite answer things, but a start. Yeah.
I don't know if we have to stop right away, but just to add on to that, I think for me as a Yonsei, when I think about the idea of trauma, my grandfather was incarcerated in Amachi, and thinking about it, I think one thing for me as I think about my next generation of the Gosei and where we are right now position is this kind of this boundary, or this push and pull between presence and absence, where these histories of, or these stories of incarceration going down to my daughter will be just ever more distant as this more absent memory that she thinks of, where it's not as active, like the people who experienced in it. She knows my grandfather, but he's not going to live very much longer. He's 95. And so just trying to create that path forward of how healing is a process, and how it transforms and changes, and how I feel like the decrease of one thing can sometimes be like an increase in another. And so I think right now I'm just trying to try to pick apart those things about the loss and what we gain through the generations as well. Mm-hmm.
Brandon, I don't know if your internet is in and out right now. I think I saw in the chat it is, but any reflections on any of these questions?
Yeah, sorry, it's the hotel. I'm blaming the hotel. So I'm catching just fragments of what people are saying, which is kind of nice. I mean, I think that one of the things I'm thinking about, which is moving this in a different direction, is just the fact of being in this space with the three of you. and how, I don't know if this is not really an answer to the question. It's not a challenge. I don't know if it's in some way related to trauma. But I think the gift of it also, because I'm just thinking that the fact of the four of us being writers has given us the opportunity to know each other and ask questions of each other and listen to each other. And so, you know, if I were to remove that part of my reality, being a writer, being a poet, how incredibly estranging it would be when life is already so estranging. So I think that, you know, thinking about now 2023 and we're invoking our grandparents and our ancestors, but that we do have this space together. We somehow have that privilege and that opportunity to be together. And I'm just really grateful for that.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I think that's similar feelings, and I think that's like the perfect note to kind of start wrapping up this program with. Feeling lots of gratitude to be able to share this conversation with you all today, and thank you to all the attendees and the orgs who were able to help put this on. It's in the chat, but please do check out our panelists after this event if you haven't already. So we have different websites and as well as Twitter handles in the chat for Brynn, Jami, and Brandon. Also, please be sure to check out their most recent works. They're all or Hydra Medusa and Under a Future Sky are out right now, and then you can pre-order Night Parade. That'll be out in November, and can keep this conversation going, you know, whether it's with you in the book or reaching out via online. So want to thank everyone so much for attending today, and thank you again to our wonderful authors and to Densho for hosting. So I hope everyone enjoyed. We'll hopefully be in touch again.
Thank you so much, Troy, for your thoughtful moderating.
Yeah.
Thank you, Troy.
You can keep this going after this.
That's so great. Yeah.
Sweet.
Mhm.